Hembro, who I will let introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Leah Hembro. I attended John Wood in 2017. I then, or 2015 to 2017, excuse me, and then I transferred to Western Illinois University, where I recently graduated in December, and I now work for ABM.
Thank you, thank you. And I know we might have just gotten a little late of or kind of a delayed start, so I'll introduce myself one more time for those that didn't hear it. I'm Andrew Happicati. I'm the Director of Advising and Retention here at John Wood. What we are doing here this evening is doing a little webinar to talk about transferring or going to get a bachelor's degree, what that process kind of looks like. So I'm a former student of John Wood Community College. I attended from 2005 to 2007, transferred away, had a very successful experience, got a bachelor's degree, and then began working at John Wood in early 2011. So I have been at John Wood almost 9 years, 8 of which has been in an academic advising capacity. So I have a lot of knowledge. I don't consider myself an expert per se, but I guess you probably could consider me an expert because I do the stuff all day, every day. We also have with us today, or this evening rather, Lyric Prather. She's a current student of ours. Lyric, if you want to introduce yourself, just who you are, what year you are, what you study.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Lyric. I'm going to be a sophomore this year at John Wood. And I think I'm getting my associates in arts and plan on getting a bachelor's in psychology. And then eventually my master's in Christian counseling. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'd say that we are good to get going here. So again, what we have here, Director of Advising and Retention. My name's Andrew Happicati. Lyric Prather is a current student, and then Leah Hembro is a former student who transferred on and is now graduated with her bachelor's degree. So she's got a little bit of a different perspective than Lyric will, a different perspective than myself as well. So why are we here? What are we talking about? About little tips and tricks to get a bachelor's degree. So a lot of the stuff that I've got here tonight, I've got 3 main talking points, and they all are kind of interwoven. And throughout this presentation, I will ask my assistants if they would provide some feedback just from their perspective about the things I'm talking about. Some of the things that I've got, like this first step here, the first thing I'm going to talk about that I think is really, really important for people to do, whether a bachelor's degree is on your radar 100%, or maybe it's just something that you've been toying around with. Maybe you're toying around with the idea of starting at John Wood and going straight to a 4-year school, or maybe you're just toying around with going straight to a 4-year school. It's all the same for everybody. So a lot of these examples that I use too, I like to use a lot of examples about other regional schools that we have in the area. So you'll hear me refer to places like Western Illinois University or Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, or Quincy University, or Culver Stockton College. I use those as examples for a couple of reasons. One, because they're close to our main campus in Quincy. People are familiar with those typically. And the other reason is because we send a lot of students to those institutions. And so just because I'm using those as examples doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that we've got these schools that we work with all the time and it's easier just because they're close to us. I mean, we could do all of these same things with the University of Alaska, I don't know, wherever you want to go. So don't think that just because we're using regional examples doesn't mean that we can't do this for other places. So the first thing, research. That's the big thing that you can do on your own anytime. Doesn't matter what you're looking at, where you're going. And so to preface this, this can be really, really overwhelming depending on where you're at in the spectrum, especially if you're a first-generation college student or the parent of a first-time college student. Maybe you went through this years ago and the whole landscape has changed, or maybe your son or daughter is the first person to go through this. There is a lot of information out there. And cost is obviously important, but the details of the degrees are important too. And so for a second here, I'm going to share my screen. Hold on just a second. We've got a chat in the chat box. I want to try and check if it'll let me. So, okay. Oh, and also too, Kristen just pointed out to me, and that's one other person we didn't mention before we started this, we also have Kristen Ritterbush as our director of admissions. She's in this meeting, but she's actually behind the scenes pulling the strings, making sure the technology works for us. So Kristen has reminded me that anybody who's in this, if you want to use the chat feature is in the bottom of the screen. If you click that button, it'll open up a chat box. If you'd like to introduce yourself and where you're from, you're more than welcome to do so. Or maybe what you're majoring in if you're a prospective student. While you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen and start talking about research. So for research, one of the things I did, and for the sake of simplicity, number one, I'm using Western Illinois University as an example. One of the first things that you can do, or that I would encourage you to do, is go visit websites. In my experience, personally and professionally, a website is going to tell you a lot about an institution. Information should be accessible, easy to find, shouldn't be a challenge to get to whatever it is that you're looking for. In the majority of cases that I worked with, information isn't hard to find on college websites, but navigating them can sometimes be tricky because they all look different. And so one of the things I'm going to do here, what I have Western Illinois University's course catalog opened up, but I'm just going to go to their website really quick to show you just kind of what you see. Usually they're bright, they're pretty, a lot of different fun pictures to look at. But what I, as an academic advisor, as an information seeker, I'm looking for are things like academics, trying to find majors, admissions to see requirements, what does a student have to do to get in. But in this case, if I'm just looking for information right out the gate, don't really have maybe an end goal in mind, I just want to kind of find some things, I always encourage people to look at course catalogs, because that has every single bit of detail possible that you would need to make an educated decision. And so on every college's website, they're going to have a search bar. And for simplicity's sake, I would encourage you to use that if you ever are going to use the catalog or look for the catalog, just because trying to find it on certain websites can be challenging. But I've already done that. Anyway, the search bars are usually up in the top right corner. And so what I have here is their business program pulled up in their course catalog. Encourage you to look at this for a few different reasons. Even if you're not 100% sure that this is even a school you want to go to, maybe you're just more interested in this particular major. Maybe business is one of several majors that you or your son or daughter might be interested in. And if so, what this is going to tell you is it's going to tell you a little bit about the program. It's going to tell you a little bit about the courses that are required within the program and some things that you have to do to get into that program as far as keeping a certain GPA maintained. You may have to have a certain amount of credit hours depending on what the program is at the institution. Business, for instance, at most institutions is pretty popular. Most institutions have very, very large business programs, and they have a lot of students that are trying to apply to them. So they do have a certain set of criteria and courses that you have to do before you get in. So not even thinking that far ahead, but for me, when I started at John Wood in 2005, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I actually had no idea what I wanted to do between the time I started until the time I ended. But business was one thing that I thought that maybe would be something that I'd be interested in doing. How I found out that would not be a thing I'd be interested in doing is doing exactly what I'm doing now, is looking at the course catalog. So what I did was I had friends that wanted to do business, and I figured, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. So in my research, I immediately see, these things here. Minor in business. These are just requirements that you have to do there. But when you get down to the major courses here, this is where I'm talking about things can get a little overwhelming, because you can read all this, but once you get down to the things like ACCT 201 and 202, Econ 231 and 232, what the heck does that mean, and how do I find it out? Well, that's what the catalog is good for. That's what academic advisors are good for too. Give myself a little plug in my office. We work with students in these majors and these programs at these institutions all the time. And so I look at that and I immediately know what it means for a John Wood student. However, if you don't know what those things mean, make sure you've got something to write some notes with, write those things down, and you can scroll down typically and you'll be able to find those courses course descriptions rather somewhere in there. We're not going to go through all of those, but ultimately the point is, again, going back to what I was originally saying, is I saw a lot of accounting, economics, upper level math courses. That's not my forte. Never has been, never will be. And that was about the time I decided business wouldn't be a good fit for me. So I moved on to the next thing. So that's what course catalogs are going to give you, or just information that you can find on a course's or a school's website rather, is what kind of courses am I going to have to do for this particular major. Nursing's another really, really good one. We have a lot of students ask about, and students just hear, you know, that you're going to find a job and you're probably going to make some good money. Both of those things are true, but you're also going to have to do a lot of science and a lot of math. And in those science courses, you're going to have to do dissecting, and you're going to have to learn about body fluids and blood. And if that's not your thing, then nursing's probably not a good fit for you. And this is just going to give you these kinds of things in a catalog or on a website are going to give you some context to these different types of programs. So going back to what I was saying about the courses too, you know, you saw the ACCT 201, 202. We as academic advisors use something that's called Transferology Lab. And again, this is a site I've already pulled up. We have staff accounts, and so ours look a little different, but this Transferology Lab, prospective students, parents, anybody can make an account on this thing. And what it's good for is it's good for allowing you to pull up a four-year institution and shows you basically, if you know you're going to start at John Wood Community College, well, how does John Wood's courses transfer to, in this case, Western Illinois University? And so that ACCT, oh, I just clicked on something accidentally. The ACCT 101 and 102, I found my prefix there for WIU. It's going to pull up the courses here. So on the right side, you've got the WIU courses. On the left side, you've got the John Wood courses. This is a tool we use all the time, but like I said, as academic advisors, we're very in tune to this stuff. We are looking at our catalog and other four-year institutions' catalogs every single day and evaluating these course-for-course equivalencies. And so a lot of them, like I mentioned with WIUs, I look at those, it looks like a foreign language to a lot of people, but to us, we know it. However, if I'm working with a parent of a student, they don't know me from anybody on the street. So I like to pull this up and show them I'm not just making this stuff up. And so if you're interested in doing enough research on the front end, this is a huge tool that you can use to just kind of help navigate your way as far as what equivalencies look like from one institution to the other. If transfer is good, if it's not so good, anything that you want to look for there. So research, number one, first and foremost. Same would go with John Wood's website. John Wood's website is, in my opinion, easy to use, easier to use, but I use it every day. You know, if you wanted to look at our programs and get a feel for what kind of course requirements you'd have to do for different majors, it's the same thing. So if I want to do, I don't know, I'll go with what Lyric said she's doing. Did you say psychology, was it?
Yeah.
So I want to see what I have to do as a psych major. See if I can find it. Also, too, I'm going to give us a little bit of a plug here. We're going to be launching a new website here in a little over a month. So everything you see now will look different and will probably be easier to find things. But here's psych. So if I'm interested in psychology, it's going to give me a little bit of an overview of what that means. Going to give me a little bit about the program requirements. And so for our transfer-based courses, programs that would lead to a bachelor's degree, there's only a few select courses you have to do for majors, but again, down here, it kind of shows you for a suggested route, the different kinds of courses that you'd have to take as a transfer student. And so then that links you to a page that comes out of our course catalog, just gives you a rough sketch of what it could look like, not necessarily something you have to follow. Everybody's guide can look different, but just kind of show you what it would look like if you wanted to finish in 2 years. So that's what that looks like. I'm going to stop talking here for a minute. And so Leah and Lyric, if in your experience, Lyric, I don't know much about you, and if you sound like you've got a school in mind that you want to go to. Did you do any of your own research on the front end? Did your advisor help you do any research, anything like that?
So coming into John Wood, well, I've always been a person who has lots of interests. So I've changed my mind a lot. And so coming into John Wood, I definitely had people help me, but at first I was starting with like elementary education, and then I kind of fell into the path of psychology or sociology. So yeah, they've been super helpful with that, with like making that transition. But yeah, I didn't really have any idea when I started. And I kind of just decided, not that long ago anyway. So yeah.
Wonderful. Leah, what about you? When you were going through this, did you do any of your own research, and did you discover anything as you were a John Wood student going to the four-year institution? You went to WIU too, correct? Did you learn anything through doing your own research that you didn't know beforehand?
I knew that I wanted to be in agriculture, correct? Like that was my main focus. That was part of my reasoning for choosing John Wood too. So when it came time to look for my 4-year, I kind of knew I was going to be closer to home. I also had a little assistance from Eric Foster because he's like, come on, this is my alma mater. We're going to apply. And, but also several people in my family have gone to Western. So I kind of already had an idea of Western in that regard. I knew they were a very prominent ag school, and that was something that I was looking into. Something for me that I did, I asked a lot of questions. I know that I worked with John Wood. They kind of prepared me to make my own schedules by the end of my time at John Wood. So I had a little more knowledge of the classes that I needed to then transfer with. When I got to Western, I was able to work with an advisor, and I basically had 3 phone calls and a visit with her, and I was kind of pretty well squared away. Something that really helped me personally is that I got on campus. That was a big one for me, and why I say that is because I went on a visit. I went to the ag open house there, and I'm sure other schools do this as well. But I went to that visit, and I was able to connect with other students that were pursuing that same degree that I was interested in at Western. So they were able to kind of help me. They were my personal guides at what classes that I needed to kind of be maybe more steered towards when I then transferred. So that's kind of how I took the reign on that one. I kind of asked a lot of questions and made some connections with already current students there.
So you utilized the resources that were at your disposal.
Yes, I did.
And you asked a ton of questions, which is fantastic, because that's the second thing that I have on my list of the top 3 things. It's being proactive and asking questions. Again, I look at this from a lens of knowing nothing, because that's how I started. I'm a first generation college student, first generation of my entire family. I was the first one to graduate, and I'm pleased to say that since I've graduated, I've had 2 graduate after me. So that was a huge thing for my family. I'm the oldest grandson of my grandparents. I don't even know how many grandkids they have, but I didn't realize how big of an achievement it actually was until after I saw my cousins after me and siblings after me do it too, and how proud they were, my parents and my grandparents both. And early on, it was really tough, because as a first generation student, I didn't know what the heck to ask, and neither did they. And the thing that was really great for me was I was a little shy and reserved, and I wasn't going to ask any questions. But I was lucky I had my grandparents. I grew up with them, and they didn't know what the heck they were asking, but they weren't afraid to ask it. And that's one huge piece of advice that I can't stress enough to people is, even if you don't have a clue what it is you're trying to do, don't be afraid to ask anything at any point in time, because this is complicated. Starting out and getting a bachelor's degree, everybody seems to have heard horror stories about things like If I started a 2-year school, are my things going to transfer? Just ask it straight out. If you start at a school like John Wood, how do you know my courses are going to transfer? We can give you those answers. We can kind of spell it out to you what things are going to look like. What do I do if I don't know what I want to do? That's a question that we hear quite a lot. It's probably more common than students that have an idea of what they want to major in right out the gate. Lyric kind of said undecided at first, but after a semester, she kind of got a feel for what she wanted to do and she's going with it. That's how it works for a lot of people. Sometimes if you're like me, you might get through the whole 2 years and still not have an idea what you want to do. In my particular case, it's not something I'd highly encourage, but at the same time, with a 2-year school like John Wood, the things that students take for a transfer degree are relatively general. So things like English and speech and psychology, math, science, general ed courses. That's why they called them those. And so I ended up switching my major several times throughout the whole thing, but I ended up doing sociology. That's what I landed on. Happy I did. And it took me 4.5 years. And so the changes of my major in my mind did have an effect on my outcome. Everybody's goal, it seems, and our goal for every student is we want to get a student in and out in as short of amount of time as possible, because that means as little money spent as possible for you, the student, or you, the parent. But some students want to be part-time and only take a couple courses at a time. That's fine too. Gen eds don't expire. They'll last forever. So if life happens to you, God forbid, and you had to stop, those courses aren't going anywhere. They're going to last as long as you live and as long as you want to keep trucking. If you want to do 2 at a time, great. It'll take you a little bit longer. But if that's what works for you, that's what works for you. But the main thing is, making sure to ask questions. And the main reason to be open and not be afraid to ask questions, especially on the front end, is because you're not going to know until you know. But also too, as you're going through it, don't ever hesitate to ask questions about, well, can I change my major? What happens if I change my major? Those are all things that we as academic advisors can help you map out before you pull the trigger and do that. In most cases, such as mine, I was lucky. I didn't have too much of an adverse effect, even though I did change my major several times. But there are some students, I just had a student actually this morning that I worked with, her a situation where she was going all the way through, she was almost ready to get into the nursing program, and now she's switching to something like business. And I'm like, oh man, she's ready to apply and everything to the program and get in the fall, and it's just not where her heart is. And now she wants to do business. And from nursing to business, that's not too bad. We can still make that work and get her out of John Wood in 2 years, which is what she wants to do. But that's going to be drastically different. But if that's what the student wants to do, that's what the student wants to do. There are some situations, say she was business and did a year of that and wanted to go into nursing. That looks a little bit different, because for business majors, like I said in the beginning, there's a very finite set of courses students have to do before they get into a 4-year school. And so why we as advisors are very much, we want to get you out in as little time as possible. That means as little money as possible. If you can't get all the courses that you need in your, let's just say you want to do 2 years at John Wood and be done. If you do your 2 years, but you've still got a couple of gen eds left over that are required for a program in business, they may not let you into that major upon transferring, which means you have an extra semester at 4-year school, which is the last thing any of us want. I certainly know that as a student at the time, it doesn't mean as much. Student loans don't mean, well, to me, it didn't really mean anything at the time. But that means something. It means something to me now because I'm still paying for it. And so if you're lucky enough to have parents that are helping you pay for college, give them a huge hug. But we know too, whoever's paying the bill, whether it's you as the student or the parent, our goal is as little money as possible. And so we need you to ask questions and be proactive. The second you think that your heart isn't in something, come talk to us, because we want to help you figure out right then and there. how do we change this to make sure that you're not going to pay any more money than you absolutely have to? So, and then the third thing kind of goes, I think it goes without saying, but it's just kind of goes off of all of these things. I mean, researching and then being proactive, asking questions. It's all about communication. So communicating with your faculty members once you get in classes, you're going to see them more than you see an academic advisor. So your relationship's going to be different with them. They're also going to have a different experience with things. A lot of times they've gone through not just a bachelor's, well, in all cases, the transfer-based courses, the gen ed courses, those faculty members all have master's degrees in their respective disciplines that they're teaching. So they've been through the bachelor's, the master's, they have a whole different set of experiences that they can provide you. But also too, like Leah mentioned, she mentioned Eric Foster, and for those of you in here that don't know who that is, that's our coordinator of student life. I believe he's been doing that for 5-6 years now. And so our student life coordinator, he coordinates all the student groups on campus, all the student activities. And so students like Leah and Lyric, who are very, very heavily involved on campus, have him as a resource to lean off of too. And Eric, just from a personal perspective, he's extremely frugal. And so with Leah specifically, WIU alum as well, that probably helped. But he's going to give students a whole different set of advice too, as far as, well, what can you do to save money? Where can you look for scholarships? Like, just all of these resources are all here at your disposal at any point in time. And so if you don't reach out there and you don't ask the questions, you don't communicate with your faculty, your staff members, advisors that you're working with, we're only going to be as good as the information you provide us. And so Leah, you kind of mentioned about transferring. You kind of knew WIU is it. How soon did you make contact after you started at John Wood? How long did it take you to contact somebody from WIU to start that process?
Oh, probably a little later than it was supposed to happen.
That's all right.
It was definitely in my second semester, or well, I would say my second year, probably still my second semester. So my last semester at John Wood is probably when I started. I know that's a little too late, but that's okay. I was still able to apply. I was still able to receive scholarships. And actually, when I did apply and sign up for classes and everything, that is when the advisor there, the ag advisor for Western, she was that's when she started working with students. So time-wise, it fell right into place, but I was a little late to the party, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Lyric, what about you? Have you started the process bridging the gap from John Wood to your four-year school?
So because my degree is super specialized, and a lot of the times only private, Christian universities have it, I've done a lot of research of where, the possible options would be. And I have a school in mind. It's Liberty University. However, I have a couple options of if I want to transfer just to go straight online to that school, or if I want to transfer to somewhere around here, like QU. Whatever is probably the cheapest, and whatever is easiest. And then if I went to QU, I would obviously get my master's in Christian counseling online through Liberty. So I've done a lot of research. Definitely my next step is to talk to an advisor and just kind of and also Eric, haven't seen him, since school's been closed, but definitely just kind of let people know where I'm at and what they can tell me about the finance part and transferring and all those credits and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the finances part of things too, because tips, tricks, I mean, I don't really have anything involving finances, but I know when people are going through this process, again, whether it's the student themselves or parent helping a student go through themselves, that's always one of the main things, is worrying about finances. Now, given the circumstances and the time we're living in with COVID-19 being a thing, transfer students are going to become even more important to larger four-year universities. The trend has already been occurring the past several years. High school graduates are just they're decreasing in sizes, the graduating classes. And so there are less brand new students to choose from, and more of those students are choosing to start at 2-year colleges because they're less expensive. So in turn, what 4-year schools have had to start doing is they've had to start offering more transfer-based scholarships for students that are going to 2-year institutions. So, and I don't want to call it an argument, I will for lack of a better way to put it, but over the past couple of years, I've heard more and more parents of students coming to different events talking about scholarship opportunities and the belief that there aren't as many scholarship opportunities for transfer students, which is why they want their son or daughter to start out at a 4-year university right out the gate. That's great and everything, but calculate that bill from year 1 to year 4, or the end of year 4, and that bill is probably going to be more expensive than it would be if you did your first 2 years at John Wood and 2 years at the 4-year institution. Any way you cut it, no matter what kind of scholarships are at play there. So in doing your research, obviously factoring in cost is very, very important. When you are searching for cost or looking for costs, be aware of a couple of things depending on where you're looking. Number one, if you just flat out look for the tuition, a lot of times that's what I refer to as sticker price. More often than not, students aren't going to pay what the sticker price is. There's always going to be incentives for students to go everywhere. Financial aid, scholarship opportunities. If you're a transfer student, there are sometimes automatic scholarships that you will receive just because you're a transfer student. QU, for instance, they have a GPA-based scholarship. So if you have a 3.5 to a 3.6, you get, I don't know, it's something like $6,000. And then 3.6 to 3.7 at $7,000. So you get a scholarship based upon your GPA. Plus, they have a scholarship just for students transferring from John Wood. So looking at institutions around, researching the things like the scholarships that they offer, things of that nature, and then sitting down and crunching the numbers. That's the only way you're going to find out. But again, if this is your first foray into this, you don't have to do that alone. We as academic advisors can help you figure all of this stuff out. Again, like I've mentioned, I hope I've made it clear, we know these things in and out, especially the academics of things, but we help students figure out cost. We help them figure out scholarships, how it's all going to shake out in the long run, what things are going to look like from year 1 to year 4, all those variables. We can help you figure that out. So if you don't quite know what it is you're looking for or what to do, we try our best to help give you the guidance you need. And if we don't know it, we know how to seek it out. We know how to seek it out quick, efficiently, effectively. We know who to reach out to. And like I said, we know how to get answers quick. So let me see if I've missed anything else. I see questions coming up in the chat.
Andy, we have a question in here about regarding a speech class from John Wood being able to transfer to a 4-year school.
Oh, cool. Let me see here. Yeah, for speech is one that is 98% of the time is probably going to be a good course to take, probably more like 100% of the time. Most schools, at least in my experience, well, all schools are going to require you to do some kind of a communications course, and speech usually fits that bill. There are, I can think of 2, and again, this is 9 years of being a professional in this capacity, 2 instances I can think of a student that wanted to go to a very specific school, into a very specific program that required something different in one case or didn't require it at all in another. And these schools were not schools that I have sent any student to since. So very, very rare. And I mean, you got to think about this in terms of statistics. I mean, in my team, there's me and I've got 5 academic advisors, 2 part-time, 3 full-time. And over the course of, 8, 9 years, that's the only 2 times I can think that has ever happened. So highly, highly unlikely that you're going to get away from speech. But the answer is yes, it's going to transfer. I would bet my house on it, and I'm not a betting man. So
I would say I know I have friends that were taking speech at Western. I would take it at John Wood because you're a smaller class size, so that's going to be less intimidating. I know, especially one of my very close friends, she ended up having to take speech at Western and she had to do it online. So she had to videotape herself for every speech she gave. And then it was publicized to the large class that she was in. So you can't get away from it. It's great to work on your people skills with this class, and I highly recommend knocking it out with Pam. She was hilarious. I loved having her for my speech class, and she ended up becoming a reference for me. She offered, and I used her quite a bit for some scholarships and some job opportunities. So that's how my speech class blossomed for me at John Wood.
yeah, that's awesome.
I also had Pam for my speech class the first semester, and it was actually one of my favorite classes I've ever been in. We had a bunch of like really silly students, but we all took the class seriously, but we all had like our own personalities, and she was so sweet and really, really, really was like super personal and intimate when we needed questions, and she was there like with anything that we needed, and she was super helpful. So yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
She was really awesome.
I also had Pam as a student, I'm not trying to out her age or anything like that, but I think she might have been relatively new at the time, and I was not at the height of my academic supremacy. That's a good way of saying I wasn't a great student, but I loved her class, and she is the only one at that time that gave me confidence to actually get up there and speak in front of people. I don't know how she did it, but she made me feel okay with it, and I will forever be grateful to her for that. So, and this is one example of many, as that a school like this, the size that it is, Leah mentioned having her as a reference, the size of the institution and getting these types of courses that are going to go everywhere while getting these connections and this help for the future like a reference. I mean, it's kind of a rarity. So yeah, and what Kristen said here, sorry, I'm going back through the questions to Nicole. What Kristen said about, where'd she go here? Yeah. If you know what school you want to transfer to, or maybe you're unsure, I'm going to share screen again. This is probably last thing I'm going to do. This is the advising and retention webpage. This is the office that I work for, or work in rather. It's within the student services area of the college. Right here on the right-hand side is everybody that works in my office. This is my information at the top here. So if you would like to jot down that phone number, please feel free to do so. And you can give me a ring. If you want to call me immediately following this, you can. I've got my phone right next to me. It's on, ready to go. You can call me in the morning, either way. We're happy to answer any questions. Like again, I'm supremely confident it's going to transfer, and this goes for everybody that's watching. If you have simple questions about anything, you want to see how something's going to transfer, what things look like from one place to the other, just give us a shout and we can look something up for you just for peace of mind, if anything else. So, got one more chat here. Oh, there she goes. Look at her go. The Wizard of Oz, Kristen Ritterbush, everybody. Let's give her a round of applause. Okay. Leah, Lyric, do either of you have anything to add? Because I believe that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions? If so, feel free to type in the chat box.
All I have to say is get involved, take initiative, ask lots of questions. I would also say if you're unsure of where you're wanting to go or what you may be still undecided once you're done with John Wood, I would definitely do some school visits if possible, if you're able to do so. If not, make phone calls. I was lucky to have friends that were also at some of these schools, so I was able to stay with them if I went to go for a visit. I would also say if you're still unsure of what you're wanting to do, I would potentially look into job shadowing or potentially picking up a part-time job in the area that you're interested in, or an internship, even better, because then you can get credits that go towards your degree. So those are just some helpful tips that I used along the way that were kind of a win-win scenario, because I was either making money or adding credits to my degree, and I was able to continue to pursue my education, and it was very easy peasy for me. It was very enjoyable. There was stress. I mean, there's going to be stress, but it was a pretty stressless process, because I was able to use my resources and they were able to guide me along the way.
One more question I got is, what if I don't know what school I'm going to transfer to? That's a good question. We have a ton of students that get into that situation as well. And with every student, it all kind of comes down to, well, what do you want to major in? And if you don't know what you want to major in, that's okay too. We start out and we try and feel you out as a student to see, what do you like? What don't you like? What do your transcripts say? What do your test scores say? We have a number of different variables that we look at. We'll look at your high school transcript if you're a brand new student, and or even if you're not a brand new student, look at those things and just kind of gauge, well, what did you get A's and B's in, and what didn't you get A's and B's in? That's kind of a jumping off point for us to just have a conversation back and forth with students to see, you didn't do so hot in math and science, so you're probably not going to do engineering, and most of the time that's a yes. And that narrows us down. It at least gives us a direction to go in, or courses to try. But at the end of the day, for every student, it's the same. With a brand new first-time college student, that first semester or even that first year, the general education courses that are required for a transfer degree overlap enough between programs to where there's not really anything you can do wrong or take wrong that's going to add time to your collegiate experience. So it gives you a little bit of time. But if you're like me and you get through, your first year and you still don't know what you want to do, you just kind of constantly have to be thinking about who you are as a person and how you're growing. Every experience that you have with people in your classes, faculty members, the homework assignments, the tests, the exams, what you do in your own personal job, even if it seems meaningless. That was another thing that Pam really did well for me, was she told our class, I can't remember what it was that we were talking about, but she told us, your life experiences right now may seem meaningless with the jobs that you're doing. I was working at a restaurant at the time, but she's like, it's all stuff that you're going to use later in some way, shape, or form. And that was like the truest thing that anybody ever said to me throughout college, because it seems like, you're just working a job to get a paycheck. But those experiences, especially at that time, taught me I don't want to work in a restaurant for the rest of my life and deal with customers in this capacity. And so you got to think about the things that you're doing, think about the things that you like and you don't like, the things that you're good at, not so good at, and just start narrowing it down one day, one experience at a time. And then we'll help you along the way. So, participants is still at 10. Does anybody else have any questions? I can't see if anybody's typing, so I'm going to give it a minute.
One thing that I would say is, it can be scary to reach out because maybe if you don't know what you're doing, you're like, well, I don't want to sound stupid, or everyone kind of gets insecure about situations like that. But I have never had a negative experience with any faculty at John Wood, and I really think that that's one of the best things about our campus is literally everyone is so nice and so welcoming and super easy to talk to and strike up a conversation, and you really feel like they care about what you're talking to them about. So I think that's really important to note, is that I think our campus is special in that way, to make students, you guys make it a priority to make students feel comfortable, and that really shows. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So I didn't see any questions come through while Lyric was talking. So we're going to go ahead and end our webinar. We appreciate all of you that attended. I think at one point I saw our participants get up to 12 or 13. So that's fantastic. We really, really appreciate you all taking a little time out of your evening to listen to us. And so I flashed my contact information, but if for any reason you have questions for Leah or Lyric, you can route those through me, and I have their contact info. I can get it to them if you'd like me to. So thank you all very much. Stay healthy, stay safe. But as of May 29th, do whatever you want, I guess, if you live in Illinois, right? All righty, everybody. Have a good evening.